Good morning. How are we doing today? My name is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit. Welcome back to another video. And today we're going to run through the pot geometry when raising the flop section of the Postflop workbook. So we're going to be raising the flop using a sizing strategy on the turn and river and see how things shake out. So I'm going to show you the process and help you get this section done very, very quickly and correctly the first time. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Alright, so starting with the prompt up above on page 181, with the blinds of 501k in a tournament, you open raise to 2.25k pre-flop, they defend their big blind, they lead 3k on the flop. So here's the exact situation, and just for the record, the sizes that you see here, the pot size right here is after their 3k bet, right? They led 3k into a 5k pot, and their 3k has been taken out of their starting stack, so their starting stack on the street would have actually been 75k, the 72 is after they put their 3k in the middle. And then no, it says raise here, but your raise, you don't know what your raise size is, so that hasn't been taken out of your starting stack yet. Okay, all that being said, the rest of this is going to look very, very similar to what you're seeing in the pot geometry when betting section, right? We have two different questions. One is going to be one sizing strategy. The next is going to be a different sizing strategy. And this is very helpful for comparing and seeing how little changes can influence your sizing on each street and final pot size and all that sort of fun stuff. And again, like I made as a suggestion in the pot geometry when betting section, if you've never done these by hand before, take your time, do at least a couple just by hand and with a calculator. Don't use an automated tool like the one we're going to use in this video. It can be very, very helpful just to do a few by hand with a calculator, but not an automated tool. So with all that said, let's start with number one together. All right, so the first question is you raise 3 times their bet, so 3 times their 3k bet right this moment, and then go half-half after getting called. So the pot size to start the street is 5k, and then we're going to fill in the rest of the table. Now, your bet or raise size in this situation is going to be how much? Well, 3 times their 3k bet is 9k, so 9k is going to be the total raise size that you're doing. The pot size after they call is going to be 9k times 2, right? Because your 9k raise, their 9k call total, and add all that up to 5k, then you have the pot size after they call. And just for the record, this is going to be the same number as this, because it's the same thing as the pot size to start the turn. And then the effective stack after they call is going to be the smallest of the stacks involved. So in this case, again, add their 3k back to their thing. They have 75k in their stack. We have 104 in ours, so obviously they have the smaller stack size. So it would be 75k minus this 9k gets us to the correct, 66k. And then we can rock and roll and go from there. So I'm just going to use an automated tool, just have to fill in a couple of different numbers. So the starting effective stack right this moment is how much? 75k, we just talked about. The pot size to start the street is 5k. Our raise size is 3 times their 3k bet, so 9,000. And rock and roll. And then over here, we just have to fill in the sizing strategy for the next streets. In this case, it's half-half, so 0.5 is all good. And we have the table set up appropriately. So we can just come in here, fill in the rest of the stuff. 23k, 23k, 46k, 11.5k. And you can do this however you want. If you don't want to use the K, you want to just write out a bunch of zeros, that's totally fine. Whatever works for you, whatever you're comfortable with. 54.5K, 92, and 31.5K. Perfect. So again, big numbers to pay attention to, your kind of overall raise size on the flop, what your bet sizes look like on the turn and river, and then especially what that final pot size looks like on the river, and seeing if the stacks got all in, yes or no. In this situation, there's still money left on the river, so of course stacks did not get in, and that might be something to keep in mind, especially if you have a big hand and you're trying to figure out, hey, can I get stacks all in? Can I get a full payoff in this situation, yes or no? Good, so that's how we do number one. Now let's do number two together. All right, so the question for number two is you make a pot size raise on the flop and then go half-half on the turn and river. So if you've never done the how the heck do I figure out what a pot size raise is, right? Pot size bet's nice and simple, but a pot size raise can be a little tricky. The trick is 3 times their bet size plus the tail, so essentially whatever was left over. So in this situation, that would be 3 times their 3k bet, so that's 9k, plus whatever the tail is, which was the original 5k, so 9k plus 5k gets us to a 14k total raise size in this spot. And then again, we can just fill out the entire thing and go from there. In the automated spreadsheet, very simple. Everything pretty much stays the exact same, right? The effective stack doesn't change. The pot size to start the street doesn't change because, again, we're looking still at this exact spot. We're still betting half-half on the turn river, so those are both still 0.5. And the only thing that really changes is our flop size when it comes to that raise, and that's 14 like we just discussed. And excellent. Now everything else we can start filling in, and let's do that real quick. So 33, 61, 33, 16.5, 66, and 44.5, 66, 33, 132, and 11.5. Perfect. All right, so let's just double check the answer key real quick. So page 181. Let's just check the bottom row, 66, 54.5, 31.5, excellent. And for number 2 on page 181, 61, 44.5, and 11.5, excellent. Good, so all that is done correctly. Now, the big takeaways here that I would definitely be paying attention to is, again, difference in that overall raise size on the flop and how that's going to impact the future streets, right? We only made and had a 5K difference between our raise sizes in these two different strategies, right? A 9K or a 14K. But if you look at the overall bet size on the river, right, when we bet the smaller number, it's 23K. When we bet the bigger number, it's 33K. So significantly larger considering that it's only a 5K difference on the actual flop raise size. And then, of course, the other thing I'm really interested in is the final pot size, which when we're going for number 2 is going to be 132K when we're making that pot size raise. But for number 1, we're only making the 3x raise. Now, all of a sudden, the final pot size is 92K, assuming that our opponent calls all of the subsequent, the flop raise, and then also the subsequent calls on the turn and river. That's a 40K difference between those two numbers with only a 5K difference in the overall raise size on the flop. And again, most people just aren't ever going to notice this because they're not going to do this kind of math. They're not going to see how those slight changes can really make some massive, massive differences when it comes to final pot size, especially if your opponent is the kind who's more likely to give action, right? Less likely to find that fold button. You definitely want to be aware of this kind of stuff. And you're going to notice the patterns very, very quickly, which is why I do definitely suggest doing some of these by hand. Even if you use the automated tool, just make sure to slow down after you do it. Look at the numbers, see if you can find any patterns. You'll find them if you pay attention, I promise you, throughout this entire section. So, as always, if you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, now you know exactly how to do this entire section. And, of course, as always, good luck out there and happy grinding.